sniffer dogs, but make them bees or maybe cockroaches and also moths. Scientists have been trying to figure out a new type of sniffer animal, in this case an insect, to see if we could update the K-9 unit at our airports. But are they actually accurate? Can you train them well? And just how many do you actually need? Today, I, Dr. Suave, drug scientist, am going to explain the genuinely weird study that looked to see which insects could work best as drug sniffing companions. The first, why? It turns out that drug sniffing dogs are actually decently hard to train. So we're talking about months and months of training to be able to have them work, but then they can only sniff for about 30 minutes at a time. And they're also very sensitive to their handler's cues. So you can actually kind of bias dogs relatively easily. So they're like, what can't you bias? And scientists went next to cockroaches, grapevine moths, and honeybees. And they did this specifically because these are easy insects to rear, and then they also have the added benefit in that they are very sensitive to certain chemicals. Let me get into this weird study that involves a police lab and a chamber of cockroaches, which sounds like a very strange Harry Potter book and is actually even weirder than you'd expect. Now, this is actually a set of two studies. So the first study was basically could we make something to see if things like moths could actually sense certain chemicals? And so they made this weird portable device. And this portable device, I am not sure of the specifics. So electricity is magic to me. I don't understand it. There is some sort of device that has a portable gas chromatograph, as well as mass spectrometer, as well as electroantennography, which is an actual word, also great band name, but seems to be something that can measure basically when antenna of various insects are firing. Scientists were like, okay, cool, we have this device now, and this device can measure just basically what chemicals those insects are sensing. Now, I'm a little bit confused about where the next step comes from. Was it that they just wanted to make this device for this purpose? They already just wanted to test insects to see if they would work as sniffer dogs? I wasn't sure if that was their original plan in the first place, and they made this device to just make it possible to do so, because here's the thing. They were like, we can't just order drugs and go and get them. So we have to go to this forensic institute to actually be able to measure those drugs. And so they brought this Ghostbusters device along with Madagascar hissing cockroaches, European grapevine moths, and Western honeybees to the Forensic Institute, to their drug space, so that they could test it with drugs. So they basically sent puffs of air to the antenna and then measured to see what the firing rate was kind of of those specific antenna. And then they were looking to see if these different insects would actually kind of test or measure those chemicals better. Would they react to those chemicals more? And what they found was that honeybees were the best. Honeybees were actually the only ones who were able to actually sense heroin. And they were also able to sense cocaine and weed as well. They didn't just sense heroin, but they were able to sense it dose dependently. So they were able to sense when there was more of it going on. So then the scientists were like, okay, let's train some honeybees. Let's see if we can accurately make them into drug sniffing dogs, but bees instead. So they trained some honeybees. So they basically had an odor that when they smelled that, they would have a mild shock that went with it. So they learned to kind of avoid that odor, move away from it. They were able to teach basically any honeybees to do this. So they literally lured them in with a cup of sugar water that was just on the windowsill in their lab. And they're like, let's trap some honeybees now. So they lured them in with the sugar water and then caught them and then put them into this chamber so that when they smelled a specific odor, they'd be mildly shocked. And then when they were done training them, they just kind of marked them to make sure they can catch them again and let them loose. It seems very Hansel and Gretel-y. And what happened is that they noticed that the bees would basically always go away from that specific odor when they were trained with the shock. And so this is their response. This is their alert. Yes, these scientists found that honeybees worked as a drug sniffing animal. They also found that the moths and cockroaches were good second candidates if you couldn't get your hands on some honeybees. And they also measured how many honeybees that you would need. So they said that 39 is a pretty good number. So about 1/5 of the time they would have a false negative, so they wouldn't actually alert when there was a drug there. And then if you got up to 67 total bees, only less than 5% of the time would they actually miss the drugs. So 67 is the prime number of drug sniffing bees you want. They said that you could actually make them even be better at this by daisy chaining their antenna, connecting everybody's antenna to one another, and then they become even more sensitive, which feels like a weird version of bee centipede, and I'm not here for that. This study was showing how their portable, rugged container that they said filled with honeybees would work really well at an airport, so that you could bring it in and then basically like you put your suitcase next to the chamber and then you see where the bees move, and that is your new device for sniffing out drugs. And if you didn't want the bees, well, moss work just as well for weed. And we also see the cockroaches work for speed where nobody else does. So you could just have a chamber full of those instead. Now, I'd like to know what your opinions are on a bee drug sniffing device that you could bring to airports and have it detect drugs. Very curious about your perspective on this now that you've probably heard this for the first time. But it is a thing that is now in existence that scientists have created. And along the way, they created a genuinely fascinating portable device to measure volatile organic compounds if you want that. But yeah, drug sniffing bees sounds like the next horror movie to be made.